All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm Sam.
I'm Dennis.
And this week, it's O Ye of Little Faith.
Oh, ye of little faith. We had so little faith that we were going to get the screener this weekend. So here's the thing. We're recording on a Sunday night, which is not unusual for us. But the thing is, we just got the screener like literally about 2 hours ago.
Exactly 2 hours ago. It's 10:09 p.m. right now, and when the screener dropped at 8:09 p.m.
Yes,
on a Sunday night,
so
which is great. We're grateful for it.
So usually we get them on Friday night, so we have a little time to sit and marinate. But we decided like we wanted to watch it. We're excited about it. We want to dive right in and start talking about it. So this episode may be a little bit shorter than our usual episodes, but how many times have we said that? And it turns out that is not the case at all. So we're going to jump in here. Betsy is going to step in here. You're going to see her maybe real quick. Hi, come on.
Floating hand with tea.
A floating hand with tea with the quantum leap mug.
Spooky.
Yeah, right there.
I know, right? It's appropriate.
Yeah, she did call something like well before
That's so cool.
Tonight's episode. I'll save that for the spoiler part. So yeah, go have fun.
Thanks. You too.
Mm-hmm. And if I look a little different, if my setup's a little bit different, we also have Betsy's mother is also visiting, so she's set up in my usual spot. So I'm set up in the dining room. But anyway, we're going to dive right in here.
We're flexible.
First off, we're going to thank our patrons. I say patrons and our donors. You're all our patrons. I'm going to stop saying patrons and donors. I overcomplicated things sometimes. Thank you for our patrons. We have a lot of new patrons this week. Thank you so much. I'm going to call them out as we go on here. Al's Place, Leap Fan Site, Bourbon and Board Games. They're new. Carolyn. Wow, cool. Carolyn, she was able to get in just in time for our last viewing party, but we had already recorded, so we didn't give her a shout out in the last episode. Cosplay Dad, Joanne Bartlett, Dana Bias, Rich Bork, Kevin is also a new one. Kevin Butcher. So we have a Kevin, no last name, and Kevin Butcher. Carol Davis, longtime fan of
Cheers,
podcast.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Carol. It's her birthday.
Happy birthday. It's her birthday. Yeah. So
by the time this drops, it won't be, but
it won't be
as we're recording.
Yes. It's weird how that works. Time. Yeah. But thank you, Carol. Dex Lower, Dermot Devlin, Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Ganny, Jason Geis, Michelle Hoffman, Amy Holtkamp, Bess A. Corey, Lady Eternal. She is also new. Thank you so much, Lady, or Eternal, however you go by. Oddly Specific Thoughter, Christopher Redmond, Adrian Saul, Karen Saxon, Mike Stouffer, Heather Strabayak. I apologize if I am mispronouncing that last name. Thank you, Heather. Damon Chigamelli, Larry Trujillo, Stuart Williams. He is also new. Thank you so much, Stuart. Jill Wilson, and of course, our anonymous donors. If you would like to become a patron, we have a couple ways you do it. If you want to do so monthly, you can do that through patreon.com/fateswidewheel. If you want to do a one-time donation, you can do that through buymeacoffee.com/fateswidewheel. And that information is in our show notes. If you are not in a place where you can support us financially, a great way you can help us out is if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, is leave us a review there through the podcast app. And even if you're not one to write much out, even if you just give us a star rating, that helps us out a lot. And we had a few come in this week, so thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And of course, your donations and your patronage, it helps us keep the lights on here at Project Quantum Leap and add new stuff, new bells and whistles to our thing. And again, our patrons and donors are always throw it out. All of our patrons, we are invited to. We have a weekly viewing party where we watch the show. We meet up a few minutes beforehand. We watch the episode, and then we chat for about 30-45 minutes afterwards about how we felt about the episode. And it's just a great time.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I have a feeling tomorrow is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, one and all. Thank you so much. If you're listening to this podcast, even if you are not a donor, thank you so much. It's just been such an incredible ride since the Revival series started airing, and we appreciate you all so very much. And for anyone that is donating some of their hard-earned money to help us keep the lights on, it means the world, and really appreciate it. I'm frankly, I get kind of humbled by it. When we started doing this, it was not something that was really on the radar at all. And so we're grateful and we appreciate you all so very much. And I think that everyone is going to be very, very excited about O Ye of Little Faith, the Halloween episode. I'm going to go so far as to call this. We've had some great episodes. We've had some really strong episodes that I would probably like put up against my top like 20 of the original series easily. I'm going to go so far as to say that O Ye of Little Faith is the first iconic episode of the revival series.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Is that your spoiler-free review? Do you want to go on? Do you have other things to say?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say, I suppose. Yeah, spoiler-free. I mean, I could say a little bit more, I suppose. I think that the acting across the board is really wonderful. I think the writing is incredibly strong. There's a point towards the very end where I wasn't fully on board, to be completely honest, with a choice that was made, but by the time it kind of got resolved and wrapped up, and by the end of the episode, I was over it, to say the least. Sure. The level of investment in the episode, in the characters, in the leap itself, a couple of the characters in the leap, I became very invested in and was moved by the resolution in a couple of instances. I think that it's shot so well. It looks beautiful. The special effects work incredibly well. There's some wonderful stuff with the hologram, and yeah, I think overall it really is the first iconic episode. I don't necessarily, it's a weird thing to try to compare, if I was to compare it with like somebody up there like Ben, for instance, I don't know that it has like the home run scene in the jail cell, for instance, but it's so different. It's like, it's apples to flying saucers. You know what I mean? Like there's not it's hard to do. And I just think that this episode does so much, so right, so well in a very different manner that it lends itself to being that kind of iconic episode. And I think that compared to the first season of the original series of Quantum Leap, where they riffed on a lot of kind of things that we had, like the film noir, the mob movie, all the kind of little things that they tried to do with varying degrees of success, sometimes within the episode itself. I think that this is such a successful riff on a couple of different genres, really, which is an interesting twist that the episode has towards the end, that it just knocks it out of the park. Grand Slam. We're in World Series season, so I'll use the baseball analogy. Grand Slam.
Yeah, it was. Let me start off from here. So, like I said, Betsy's mom is visiting, and we were chatting last night, and I did not know Betsy's mom, Marilee has never seen an episode of Quantum Leap. Any episode at all. She was aware that it was a time travel series, and that's all she knew about it. So don't take our spoilers away, NBC, but Marilee watched the screener with us tonight. We sat down and we're watching it on our laptop because we don't have any fancy setup to like cast it to our TV screen or anything. So we just sat down on the couch downstairs in our family room and we watched it, and she absolutely loved it. She said last night we were settling in to watch some other stuff, and we ended up like watching an old Julia Child cooking show. Like we found it somewhere, like old school. So we watched that because Marilee said like she's not very much into spooky stuff.
Sure.
But she really enjoyed this episode. And I think it speaks to like the strength of this episode. Like there's plenty of spook going on, but there's also enough comedy throughout the episode, especially by Raymond, to it just totally cuts that out where it never gets too freaky. And whoever it does, like there's that bit of levity that just kind of reminds us like, hey, we're just doing a fun time travel show here. This is all good. And so to speak to everything you said, like it was just wonderfully shot. Like I like just several notes of just like camera angles, music. Just this is the first, if not truly great episode of the series, because I think somebody up there like Spen and the Bounty Hunter episode, those were fantastic, especially in their own ways too. This is the first like very fantastic genre episode of the series, and I think we can see from the preview for next week's episode that we're going to get another like really cool genre episode, and I think it's it's going to be something very different. So you said this was like the first like truly iconic episode of the new series. Like I was thinking as we were getting ready to record, like I really feel like this episode, it seems like we're turning a corner into something else. Like it's just like the series is finding its footing just a little bit more. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this episode. So with that, dive in.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say real quick to your point about it kind of turning the corner, I feel as though we've heard that with the way the show kind of got started and the changeover of the showrunner, that there was kind of some reshuffling of the deck, and not in any sort of negative way. It was just kind of this idea that, okay, we can bring some new things to bear perhaps on the direction of the series, and that the first sort of like 4 episodes or so, and obviously the reshot pilot, were really kind of holdovers from the previous sort of creative regime. And I use that very loosely because obviously, like, Brian and Steven are still involved and listed as executive producers, are still writing all that sort of stuff. But like, I feel like that there's there was a bit of a shift, to say the least, and we've really started to see that. And I agree with that comment. I think that it's definitely we've started to get that shift. So it's exciting, and I agree. The leap out for next week, I mean, for me personally, I was like 14 again, like literally 14, because I just, even with the music cue, like I'm assuming that we're in like probably like 95, 96 with the Blur music playing, and yeah, I'm 14 or 15 again, and it just hit me right away, which is really cool that we've seen a lot of leaps that are frankly before my lifetime, right? I mean, with the 70s and 60s and 30s rather, and stuff, and 1870s obviously, but like, to get something that is so clearly in my lifetime and so rooted in that, and obviously we'll be able to talk about that plenty later, but yeah, let's dive into spoilers
for sure. So should we address I did not grab these notes, but you did, who wrote and who directed this episode?
Yes. So the episode was brilliantly written by Margarita Matthews. Again, I just think she did a phenomenal job, and the director was Chris Grismer. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I thought the direction was just phenomenal as well. There are a couple of scenes in particular that you just have to think, with what little we know about film and television directing. Like, I've been on some sets, I've worked on some, pilots and stuff. Like I get some things, but still, what I don't know could fill an ocean. And so like, you just get that feeling that like those scenes owe a lot to the direction. And so, yay, right? Like I think that's just some great work overall, and not in a way that it's like you see the director's hand, because you don't necessarily want to see that, but it's just like as you're watching, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, and the guest cast is great too. So anyway,
the reason why I'm laughing is I just had you talk about like our limited experience like working on camera. Like we've done like more like theater stuff, and we've done some on camera film, television stuff, like independent stuff. I just remembered one of my few actual like on television, you might have actually seen it somewhere, acting gigs, is I was in the National Geographic series Is It Real, which was kind of like this paranormal thing back in the mid 2000s, which was about the haunting of a bar in Covington, Kentucky.
Nice.
And you talk about like the special effects and everything. At one point, like later in the shoot, they had to do like this thing of like they actually have like a mechanical bull in the thing. So they had the mechanical bull like suddenly start going while the subject is like closing up late one night. And they had to pull chairs off of table, like you put the chairs like on tops of tables when you're cleaning up for the night. And so they had to pull the chairs off the tables. So they recruited us actors to be the one to pull the fishing line to pull the chairs off the tables. And I'm like, this is a non-union job. I've been here for 12 hours. I'm getting paid $500. I'm just ready to go home. Anyway, that's my experience in spooky film work. But anyway, but speaking of, so are we in Covington, Maine? Are we in the same town as the OG episode? They mentioned that Daisy's death was reported in the Covington Gazette.
Okay, it's possible. I thought it might have been Maryland, just because at the end of the episode, she says that he's headed back to Baltimore.
Sure. Okay.
But maybe I don't know.
That makes more sense,
right?
That makes Maryland. But we are in a Covington.
Right. We're in Covington. So yeah. How about fantastic. That? Yeah, and right. Owing to the leap out in last week's episode, I mean, everyone knows that setup, right? I mean, he's standing there, he's a priest, they open the door, Father, come in, he goes in, they close the door, the 9 turns into a 6. Now the address reads, instead of 669, it reads 666, and things are about to get spooky. Again, right off the bat, I feel like the stakes are set in a really wonderful way. I love Ben. We talked about this a lot when it came to the original series, about the sort of the fish out of water element that Sam has, and Ben has that in spades in this episode, and it's really nice. There's a lot of stuff in this episode that reminds me of the classic series a lot, in good ways. It's not just like cheap fan service. It's just again, it feels as though that there's some nice stuff that's at play here, and Raymond in particular is just phenomenal. What a wonderful showcase for him. The comedic bits, the serious bits, the romantic bits, that there's just so much wonderful stuff for him, and of course he nails each and every one of those moments. It's really excellent.
It is fantastic. I mean, I just wrote like so many notes of just like the bits that he was able to do, the quick recoveries that he was able to do throughout the episode, and not to list them all, but yeah. And to that note, to using like Merrilee as a metric for it, like she cracked up at every one of those.
Nice.
Like the quick recovery comments that he made.
I mean, I laughed out loud a number of times. I'm not talking about like I was rolling in the aisle, but it got a number of for me at moments, which is great. I loved the sprinkling of comedy throughout the episode. None of the characters I felt like were too broad, though. That was the thing that was wonderful, is that everything felt very grounded. I love the way they leaned into kind of the Depression era, societal issues and financial issues with this family. I obviously, the interplay between Ben and Addison, it's the least we get of any episode, because one of the things that happens very early on is there's something wrong with the imaging chamber, and he can't hear her. She can't hear him. They can no longer see him. Ian, they don't know what's going on. It's really great stuff. I love when Addison pops in, she pops in, boo. It's kind of our first sort of lighter moment. They get into the bathroom, and here's a moment, like, I'm not saying that this is the case. But it's worth just kind of saying, because there was talk, I believe, of like the She-Hulk writers room. They did some stuff on that show where they intentionally wrote some scenes with certain people in mind. But there's a moment when they first get into the water closet, when Ben is like, an exorcism, and Addison's like, keep your voice down. And I immediately just thought of all the people that we have seen on social media complaining about, like, oh, they're not careful enough with talking about blah, 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 blah. And I was just sort of like, there you go.
There you go. A little wink
I thought,
there.
right? I thought that was really nice. There's another nice moment too, where he's talking about he doesn't believe in possession or whatever, and Addison's like, you're literally possessing that man's body right now.
Fair point. Fair point. So many great sound bites out of this. So many great sound bites out of this one. And I will say, one of the truly and genuinely spooky moments of the episode is when Addison steps back from Ben starting to perform the exorcism, and the sound goes out, and there's like a close-up shot of her calling his name, and he doesn't realize, because she stepped out of his periphery, but he doesn't realize that they're losing contact. I just thought that was a wonderful touch.
I agree. There was a moment, and I could be nuts. I will fully, own that, and just completely wrong about this. But there was a moment when they first get to Daisy's room, and Ben has to start performing the exorcism. There's a wide shot, and I swear that the observer was not Addison, that it was Janice. And then when we came back in the next shot after a close-up, it was Addison again. I swear I saw Georgina Riley in the background. And if that was the case, because it was blink and you'll miss it, brilliant. And if it's just my mind imagining things, then so be it.
That I did not see that, but that is interesting. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, right. And part of it was because Addison's hair, I felt like it looked wonderful. But it was like, it was the way that it was kind of down over her shoulders and the color of her hair. It just looked different. And it could just be because she was in the background of the shot and it was a little blurry or whatever. But I had a thought that maybe it was. So we'll see.
So yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead because
right.
Let's get to the first bit of like, the first step is you ask the demon to present itself.
Before we do that, I want to throw one thing. We get some really wonderful character moments for Ben where he talks about not being a religious man, he's not really a man of faith. And I think that that's wonderful because there was a lot of assumptions were made, including assumptions on our own part, because we've talked about it in the past. In the pilot script, and even in the first character descriptions that came out, he was described as a man of faith. And how will he balance that with this like scientific endeavor and everything. And I have to say, personally, I love that they decided not to do that, because I think it's a nice contrast in a way to Sam, which is something that gets touched on in this episode, which is also freaking lovely. But we'll get there. Sorry.
Before we get there, there's also a scene in Ben and Addison's first exchange where we're talking about Ziggy says there's an 80% chance he's there to perform an exorcism, and neither one of them can believe that. And Ben is incredulous at that. And Addison's line, "The machine sent you here for a reason." For this reason. And I love like that idea of they're kind of doubling down that somehow I'm still not clear what they mean, like the machine. Are they talking about the accelerator? Are they talking about Ziggy? I'm still not quite clear, but whatever it is, like the machine is the one that sent him here. In contrast with, like you said, later in the episode, they flat out address through Ian that, hey, Sam Beckett thought that God was controlling the leaps. So,
which is like almost the line verbatim. Ian says, they say Sam Beckett believed God was controlling. This is great.
When the first part of that sentence came out of Ian's mouth, I was expecting it to go, Sam Beckett encountered mummies.
Oh boy,
I'm
glad that's
Sam Beckett encountered angels. I was expecting it to go there.
Sure, right. One time Al was the devil. No, I loved that moment. I love that moment for Ian. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a second, but I love that moment, and I love the fact that they have been able to. When I say they, I'm not talking about Ian in this case. I'm talking about, I think, the creative team, how they have been able to subtly build in these elements of the technology being in charge and what impact that might have, what effect that might have. And it's really, when you think about the world that we live in today, I mean, think about what just happened like yesterday, with Elon Musk buying Twitter, and how, or 2 days ago, whenever it was, and how that has already impacted so many people and the way that we think about that platform. Sure. And yet there's like this need for it, like we still are so attached to it. And I'm it's becoming more and more clear. And as it does, it really has me intrigued as to where they're going. And the fact that Ian would bring up Sam and God in such a way, and that this episode would be so much about faith versus science and, in fact, and stuff like that. And finding a way to put those two things at odds without coming right out and saying, like, this is what we're doing. I've really, really enjoyed seeing that unfold. And I hope it's something that they continue to build to, because I think that it could, I think it could be really, really interesting, in particular with the way that, again, kind of almost putting the current project at odds in some ways with the original project. And I don't mean that in like some sort of weird, like, Sam Beckett versus Ben Song sort of way. Like, it's not that we're not heading towards the Royal Rumble or anything, but that like, or temporal rumble in this case, but that there are, that there are these different sort of motivations behind and different perspectives. That's the key, right? Is you look at what, 30 years ago was compared to today, and naturally the perspectives change. And it's very reminiscent of, like 150 years ago with like just seeing the Industrial Revolution and seeing machines start to really kind of take the place of man in the workplace, and seeing the way that impacted people's faith in general, and seeing I think it's important too to just note that this episode taking place in the Depression, about what that period of time was like for so many people, and how technology was also kind of at a standstill in that particular point. It wasn't until World War II when things really started to speed back up again. So it's just interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things that are happening and at play right now. And I love the way that this episode kind of continues to build that and brings it maybe a little bit more to the forefront than it already has. Although I would argue that previous episodes have certainly used that element as well.
And does it in a fun way, not a preach way. So speaking of the era and Great Depression, I know through different sources we'd seen the year 1936. Was that ever actually confirmed in the episode?
I don't know that it was, to be honest with you.
Okay.
If it was, I missed it. I know we saw some newspapers.
I know.
I'll have to rewatch. That's one of the. I think it's one of the caveats of the way that we're doing the podcast right now. Is generally we get one chance to watch it and then we dive in. But there is a newspaper. I'm sure that I thought 1939, but maybe it was 36. Maybe the 9 went upside down. I don't know.
Of course. Yeah, we get that little joke there at the beginning. Did you see the really bad article that was, I'm not sure what source put it out, but it was clearly written by AI. Like they fed this thing into Jarvis. Yeah. They fed this thing into Jarvis and they didn't even edit it. At one point in the article, and my friend Stephanie, she pointed it out in our Facebook group. They wrote Ben's name is Ben Musically.
Yeah, I did see that.
And they didn't fix it. Just make it obvious that you let AI write this article and you didn't even go in and.
Yeah, this may make me a bad co-host of a Quantum Leap podcast, but I honestly don't read a lot of stuff or even listen to a lot of stuff about the new show. I think for me personally, I just want to keep my perspective fresh and mine own. And some of those sites are just so obviously not worth anyone's time.
The thing is, I wouldn't have read that article except more than one person pointed out how bad it was, and someone pointed out they even got Ben's last name as Musically.
Yeah.
But to your point, and I was messaging, I think with it was with Barry Donovan. I'm not sure, but I was messaging with somebody just saying I love other stuff. I don't listen to a lot of other Quantum Leap stuff because, like you said, I'm afraid that it's going to color my view, or it's going to I am going to take an idea and I'm going to take it for my own, and I'm going to
you're right,
and I'm not going to give the right attribution. I'm going to think it's my own thing. So I love the other Quantum Leap podcasts, but I don't. Yeah, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things obviously that's been important to us for a while now, and I don't want us to get too far off track. I want us to get back to the episode, but I think that it's important that we do want the community and the fandom to continue to grow and be healthy, and the more the merrier, and the more voices that are out there, the better. Certainly, to get a wide array, diverse array of voices talking about the show is certainly a dream of mine. It's difficult, it's weird, and plus there's just limited time, and there's so much going on in these two tired dads' lives, and so it's difficult sometimes to pay attention to everything. But I think that it's I got my Google alerts, I'm following all the other podcasts, I'm certainly paying attention to what's out there. It's just I don't necessarily always read every article or listen to every podcast or that sort of stuff. It gets difficult, and I can only imagine that it's the same for a lot of the other folks that are out there doing this. I don't imagine that they're listening to us every week either. So those of you that are, thank you. It is interesting. I know that there's a lot out there, and there's just a couple of places that I think aren't necessarily worth the time, and it's the reason why we're doing our best to stay on top of everything as best we can, because we want to try to bring you the information in our way, and contextualize it as best we can too, because I think that that's the important piece it's missing in a lot of the reports that go out there about certain things, including ratings, and that missing context can make things look a completely different way, and it's so easy to just spin things in any way that you want anyway. So and it might get a lot easier to do that in the new Wild West that is Twitter. So
yes.
But anyway, back to the episode.
I have this weird image in my head before we get back. Because you mentioned that Musk taking over Twitter and how everybody's there, and the discussion on Twitter right now about like, do I stay or do I go? Like, I hate Musk, but I also I love this public platform that we're all in right now. And you know what is happening right now, Sam? The big corporation has taken over Walnut Grove. And the people of Walnut Grove are deciding, do they stay and live under this new ownership, or do they blow up the town? And if you get that reference, you're our people. Anyway, so to get back into the episode. So when the demon first presents itself, it turns out I was wrong later in the episode, and we'll get to it. But when the demon first presents itself, I'm like, oh, they are unambiguously going for it.
Right?
Like, there's going to be no well, there's a rational explanation or whatever. Like, nope, here is a demon. All right.
And you know what? I never had a problem with it through the course of the episode. I'll say this too. They leaned into it so heavily. And I think, again, a lot of this is a testament to the acting as well as the writing, is that they had me, and they had me comfortably accepting the fact that this episode was going to be supernatural, completely supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And then when it wasn't, I loved that. It just worked. And I remember sitting there, and it was like when the fact that they were being poisoned and drugged came out, there was no sense of disappointment. There was no sense of like, oh, they could have done supernatural and they decided not to. It was like, this is great. And I cannot get over how finely crafted an episode it is. Like, that doesn't often happen. I feel like it's so hard to set expectations a certain way and then flip the switch and not have some room for disappointment in the viewer or the audience. Like, it's so difficult to do. I think that there are a lot of major motion pictures that have been successful with stuff like that, sure. But I also think that those major motion pictures usually get months to shoot and perhaps years to write, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about a television program that they're shooting, on a 10-day schedule or whatever. Like, it's pretty remarkable.
Sure.
I really believe that.
Yeah. And I will say, when the poison reveal was made, I was disappointed in myself for not even thinking of that possibility sooner. And here's what I'm going to say to this episode's credit as compared to the OG. I'm really glad that the road they didn't go down, because the OG, they went down this road one too many times of supernatural, rational explanation, and then right before Sam leaps out, oh no, it's a twist. Turns out it really was a supernatural thing. So I'm glad that they did not. I'm glad that they didn't go down that road.
Yeah, it's one of the things, I think if anyone goes back and listens to those episodes, or has listened to those episodes, depending on how long you've been kind of following along, a lot of times those episodes of the classic series were not ones that I fully enjoyed. They had enjoyable moments, they certainly, but no, I think that there's some difficulty with them, Tahotep and Portrait for Troyan, and even B-Man. Like, I know that there are a lot of people out there that love B-Man, and that's fantastic. I don't necessarily know that I'm one of them. I love parts of it. I love, I think
that is slander. You shut your mouth.
but yeah, I definitely think that this is not the case here. It would have succeeded had they decided to just keep it supernatural. Like, I would have been like, okay, like I would have been fine with that, and that's, and kudos, I think that that's something to be celebrated. And I hope, I genuinely hope that the rest of the audience feels the same way.
For sure. I will say, I was the black whatever special effect you want to call it, that was especially effective for me, because the couple of times that I thought that I encountered something supernatural, and I know it wasn't, it's an irrational thing, but sometimes that I've experienced a little bit of sleep paralysis upon waking up, and like there was a figure in the room, like it was very much of that. Yeah. Very much of that variety. I know it wasn't real. I know it's, it's like waking up and being partially paralyzed and whatever, but yeah,
it's certainly the stuff of my nightmares, without a doubt.
Sure.
I mean, that is the type of thing that I've seen in my nightmares. There's a very specific recurring nightmare that I've had since I was probably like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. And it was very much that sort of thing, loose in my grandparents' house. And I can, I can, that dream, it's been a while since I had it, but now of course saying that I'm in for it, but
here we go. So
yeah.
apparently, that was like in our imagination. So yeah, I really enjoy like the special effects they did. Even like the first, one of the first times that Ben is sitting next to what's her, Daisy's bedside.
Mm-hmm.
When she starts to get possessed by the demon, like her head vibrates, and it was clearly like there was some like camera work special effects.
Yes, that was one of the things too, and I wonder if that's one of the reasons that the screener was held up as long as it was, if they were working on these special effects. The special effects are without a doubt a success across the board. And now that we're in spoiler territory, I feel like I can talk about this a little bit more. That includes the hologram special effects. The stuttering in and out of Addison, and the stuttering in and out of someone else that we'll get to later. But I think that all of the exorcism, demon special effects worked really, really well. Carrie Metters is the actor who plays Daisy. I thought she was phenomenal in the role. I mean, I don't usually use words like this, but it felt kind of like a tour de force in a way, because she has to do so many different things. And I felt like she did them so well. And by the end of the episode, I mean, she has two incredibly moving moments. And there's one at the tail end of the episode that she has with Ben that is just like, again, there are moments of the episode where I'm just sort of like, where the writers kind of doing some of the stuff to just be like, yes, guys, we hear you. Yes, we know the old show exists. Yes, we're very familiar with the old show. We know how it works. Like, yes, but I'm whatever. If that was the case, awesome. If it wasn't the case, awesome. Either way. I think that the scenes that Ben has initially in there, the oh hell no, the mix of like terror and comedy, it just ends up playing so well for me. And again, the show has really done a great job of infusing those lighter moments into heavier subject matter. And I continue to think it does it better than the original series even did. I really do.
You are not wrong. and I feel like we're getting burned in effigy based on people saying that. But to get back more into like the plot, so we're introduced to Felix. Was it Felix?
Yeah, Dr. Felix Watts, played by Cheeto Nukocha. God, I'm positive I'm not pronouncing that properly, and I'm sorry, but what a great character. Great. Yeah, and another great performance. Again, the guest actors really showed up.
It's all
without a doubt.
And it's like, I mean, it's all like very ensemble. Like no one, I mean, other than the actor who plays Daisy, like they all like just click really well. Like no one like really stands out as like really, really bad or really great. Like it's just all like as you should be in an acting ensemble. Everybody just compliments everybody very well.
There's something about this episode as a whole. Maybe it could be the single location. It could just be the actor's background in general, the way that it's written, perhaps, or whatever. But it's one of those things that just reminds me of like a really good play.
Oh yeah.
Like it feels very like a great piece of theater. The thing that I love is the characters that are grounded, are so well grounded, and that I think adds to my investment and buying into the overall storyline as well. If there's one character that stands out a little bit, it's probably it's escaping me right now, the brother
Charles or Percival.
Percy, Uncle Percy.
He almost had a little Matthew McConaughey thing going on.
Like a True Detective thing. But the thing is, again, I think that's absolutely intentional. And I think it works incredibly well because he's drunk, like he's drinking gin like it's water. So and we learn a lot about all of the characters, which is really nice because they get to spend more time in the Leap. And I am absolutely not someone who's been criticizing them for the Leap project balance, or I think that they've been very successful. If I look at the past 6 episodes, overall, I think they've been incredibly successful at finding ways to balance that and getting me invested into at least one of the characters in the leap, which is all I really ask for. I didn't necessarily feel that way about the premiere episode, but there was a lot of stuff going on in that episode overall, so it's hard to criticize it for that too much. But I think that this episode in particular, because we do spend so much time on the leap, we get to get invested in even more characters than we normally do, and it works incredibly well.
Works very well. So let's talk about Aunt Contessa. Because from the minute I met Aunt Contessa, I immediately thought of Dorothy Yeager from the B-Man. Did you?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, not even like the way acting, because they don't act very similar, but just the look. They looked very similar. And so when Aunt Contessa turns up dead, I was like, oh, yep. I mean, one, nice nod. Two, I thought we were headed the way down of the B-Man, and I thought like characters were going to start getting picked off one by one.
Right.
Which on one hand I would have enjoyed, but on the other hand, I'm glad that they kind of subverted that expectation.
Me too. And I thought the same thing. Amanda Carlin, by the way, is the actor who played Aunt Tessa. And I think that yes, I thought the same exact thing. You know, upon her demise, it was like, oh, okay, like who's next, sort of thing. And the fact that there wasn't a next was a nice subversion. And that's the thing that the episode does so well. It sets up a lot of wonderful things, and then it subverts them sometimes just ever so slightly, and it really, really worked for me. You know, even with the maid, Magda, played by Colleen Foy, another great character, another wonderful performance in the episode. I feel like that there are some things that get set up with her, and it kind of, I was leaning towards like, oh, she and Percy have something going on, and they're trying to, you know, work an angle here, when we kind of found out about the whole poisoning thing. And the fact that they kind of subverted that was wonderful. I loved it. And I love like the fact that she put the dead fish under her bed, and then of course it plays into her beliefs, and again examining the faith and doing this really wonderful thing where, like, to bring in another faith, to not have this just be like a Christian, you know, Catholic kind of bent on all of this, to then bring in Judaism in that way, I thought was really wonderful. And I thought just played really well. And it played really well too, to like the, you know, the different class system set up, and the fact that, like, you know, she's likely a Jewish immigrant, and here she is, she's got to be the maid. And, you know, whereas we've got this Catholic family that's got a lot of money. And again, there's a lot of really wonderful social commentary at play here, specifically like related to that era, which I think again adds to the success of the episode.
Absolutely. And you know what else they did? They didn't have Magda be dead at the end of the episode.
That's right.
Turned out to be a ghost. Turned out to be a ghost the entire time. Somewhere around in here, so we get so after Aunt Tessa's death, Felix is starting to believe. And I love the scene between him and Raymond. And Raymond says the thing like, you know, in school that I learned, you have to like examine all the variables, whatever. And Felix was like, they taught, not in seminary or whatever he said, but basically like they taught you that in Catholic school. I love Raymond's, the
Vatican, it's like,
the Vatican, yes.
Oh, he's so good. And the
just
thing
like
is,
Raymond, like the way he every recovery of his,
and he's able to take you on like these little journeys within, and it's such a wonderful thing. It reminds me of a way of Martin Freeman, and the reason why I bring him up is because I just remember such a nerdy thing. They're not great movies by any stretch.
He said on a Quantum Leap podcast,
but they're remarkable, right? But they're pretty remarkable in their own way. But in the Hobbit films and some of the behind the scenes documentaries, Ian McKellen, he talks specifically about Martin Freeman's acting, and it's really lovely, some of the things and compliments that he has to say about him. And it really spun me off into any time I see Martin Freeman in anything, I'm watching along. I watched Fargo over the summer when I had COVID. That sucked. But anyway, and that was another great example. Sherlock is another great example. He has this wonderful way of taking you on these journeys within a moment, sometimes with only his eyes or just a little, twitch of the mouth or something like that. And the thing is it would be so easy to try to break that down into some sort of technique, but it's not technique. There's no artifice here. It's just literally they're going on that journey in a very honest way, and they're just they're behaving. And I think that, Martin is so wonderful at that. And Raymond does that as well. It's something like, again, we've heard him at times referred to or compared to Tom Hanks. And the thing is it's like, I mean, Tom does that stuff too, where it's like all you got to do is put a camera on him. Just put a camera on him and something's going to happen and you're going to like it. And Raymond's got that quality and it's really wonderful. And there's some scenes that he has with the mirror image later that are so good. And kudos to the mirror image as well. Like kudos to the actor playing the mirror image, who we mistakenly thought was Chris Rubenthal. You know, every once in a while we get stuff colossally wrong, and that was colossally wrong. But I thought that mirror stuff was really wonderful. And I enjoyed that so much.
And here's the thing, we've talked about before on the podcast, like in the old series, like when we see the mirror image, I would love if they actually started utilizing the actor, and that when you see Ben talk and you see the mirror image, like you actually hear the mirror image's voice. And I'm sure for various reasons, and our friend Lauren on Twitter, like she DM'd us this week and like gave us some insight in like how they have to pay the actors differently, where if they actually speak versus if they don't speak, what the mirror image does. And this is something we talked about before that we suspected. Then it puts them up into a different pay grade, and they got to pay them more, and that's why. I really wish NBC would just cough up the money. And if the writers do think that viewers aren't going to get it, just trust the viewers. I would love to see them, when we see the mirror image move their mouth, I would love the mirror image actor to actually speak. And it would work so wonderfully well. I had my issues with the second season of Russian Doll, but Russian Doll, we've talked before, is very Quantum Leap inspired, and they were not afraid to use the other person's voice, use the other person for different camera angles when they were showing like different people's point of view. I would love that.
I think that would be really, really cool as well. And whether or not it's feasible for whatever reasons, whether it's, financial or whatnot, I'm fine if it doesn't happen. But yes, it would be really cool if it does happen. I wonder too, is it like, do you now that you've kind of almost set this precedent in a way, it's like, do you kind of break something if you redo it in a different way later on down the road? And I don't think so, but I mean, I guess it's worth bringing to bear now because we've seen this type of thing. But I don't disagree with you. I recently, over the past couple of days, I've been a little under the weather, and had a little time since we, got the screener late. I just watched Queer for Fear on Shudder, which is this wonderful 4-part documentary series that Brian Fuller produced, and it talks about the history of queer representation in horror films, and also about how characters were coded at times, and films were coded in such a way that that there was there was just an attachment to these films by the queer community. And so seeing the co-creator or creator rather of Russian Doll talk at length during the course of that just reminded me that I really need to see that show. It's also a great way for me to recommend the documentary series because I think it's phenomenal and does some really wonderful things. The first 2 episodes in particular are stunning, just stunning. Really the way that they go in depth about literature, about queer creators being kind of at the helm for so much of early horror, and how it gave them the opportunity to speak in ways that they were unable to. In other venues and so it was just it's wonderful. Anyway. Sure. No, I don't disagree. I think that the interesting thing is here too, they're talking about the way that Ben is seen or not seen or heard or not heard over the course of this episode is also important, I think, thematically and plot wise to the episode, because one of the things that happens right off the bat when he sees Daisy that we've neglected to mention earlier is that Daisy looks at him and says, "You're an angel sent here for me." Which leans in, of course, to some of the stuff that from the classic series where, that's how Sam was seen on occasion, and specifically in Another Mother, how Al and Sam were seen as angels to help Teresa's family. And I think that it's really nice. And it plays in, of course, towards the ending and the final scene between Daisy and Ben as well. But it's our first kind of hint that it's like, she sees him, she sees him.
Sure. And especially now with this new dynamic of both Ben and the Leapy are physically there. And the fact that we know now in hindsight that Daisy was drugged, like how did her being drugged affect that? Back to the mirror scene where I really thought they were about to go in the mirror image scene. Speaking of both people being there at the same time, when he starts talking about, well, like, I need to learn to step back and have faith in things that I don't, whatever. I really thought that we were going to go to a place of Ben suppressing himself and letting Davenport come forward.
Right. Or at the very least, being able to like hear Davenport.
Yeah.
Like if not doing that, you know, that there would have been that they would have literally communicated. Now, I will say that I like the notion that perhaps it's left up to the viewer, because I don't think that it's wrong to interpret that scene as perhaps that's what Ben did do. Ben did actually talk to Davenport in a way, you know, that it might not have been made explicit for us, because then it also gives the viewer the opportunity to interpret it in a way that Ben is basically just talking to himself and trying to figure out things for himself in a verbal fashion. And he has this wonderful device where he can look into the mirror and see another face, and it gives him the opportunity to have that dialogue that he can't have with Addison at the time. So I think that it's nice in a way, almost preferable for me personally, that it's left up to interpretation, because again, I don't think it's a wrong take for someone to say, man, Ben got to talk to the, you know, to the lead in this episode. I don't think that's wrong.
I don't know if I read that part. I will say, to that point, the way that they shot the mirror image, a lot of times he felt like, even though we weren't hearing his words, and they were, I think very wisely, they limited the number of times we saw that actor lip syncing to Raymond Lee's words. But a lot of times when they cut back to him, he was in, like, just in his eyes, like he was kind of having a conversation with Ben.
There was like a twitch of his mouth at one point as well that I really loved, because it did, as I was watching, I kind of was like, that wasn't Ben that did that. Like that was that.
I felt like more than once, like, oh, like I felt like more than once, oh, like we're not seeing, like, we're not seeing Ben, like we are seeing Davenport.
I completely agree. There's another moment of comedy that I just wanted to bring up, because I was reminded of it, is that when Ben picks up the book, the exorcisms, he opens it up. It's like, oh, bookmarked, how kind. So he doesn't have to like look through to find the exorcism page or whatever. I thought that was a really nice moment of levity in an otherwise fairly intense scene.
So let's before we start making our way to the end, we haven't talked very much about the project. First off, emergencies.
Oh God, Mason, I just yes, everything about you is always so phenomenal, and this episode is no different. I thought
Mason was hiding in the computer decks. That's what I thought they were doing. Like, oh God, this is a supernatural thing. Nope, I'm out. Right. I love that they were investigating through Reddit.
Me too. I thought that was it was something that I wrote down, and it was a nice callback to that sort of missing scene, you know, that we didn't get in What a Disaster. And I loved that. And I love the way that they carried themselves in general in this episode. And I thought that there was some really wonderful interplay with Addison. But even more than that, I felt like Ian had a couple of moments where the camera was just on them, just briefly, where they weren't speaking to anyone else. There wasn't any sort of interaction happening. And again, there's just stuff going on. There's stuff happening. You know, the camera would linger ever so slightly on them after, you know, Addison walked away and whatnot. And it's kind of like, man, like everyone just feels so alive. And tell you, somebody else that feels alive is Jen. I mean, oh my God. Like, honestly, the little scene that she and Addison have over next to like the rock wall, fantastic. Jen is phenomenal. Narissa is fantastic. I am so loving the way that this character has been built, because the first few episodes, I kind of just felt like, okay, like, that's just who Jen is, and that's fine. Like, Jen is there to be like our procedural like cop, you know, just playing David Caruso and CSI or whatever, right? You know, and I don't mean that literally. I mean, the actor was clearly better than that, but like, I think that the way that she's been written and the stuff that she's done and the chemistry with everyone, really, I mean, the chemistry she has with Ian, the chemistry she has with Magic, obviously, and with Addison, just some great stuff. And I loved that scene so much. I love the dialogue. I love, you know, what was written for her, and I thought she knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. So we should talk about, you know, this episode has some supernatural stuff. It has some mystery. You know what it doesn't have?
What doesn't it have?
Magic.
Son of a bitch. You're right.
Magic. Magic is not in this episode. And it was in this scene between Jen and Addison that I realized, like, we're this far into the episode, we haven't seen Magic, we're probably not going to see Magic.
Yeah.
There's also that. I love Ernie Hudson. I'm fine with, if every once in a while, if it means we get to focus more on other characters, if sometimes we don't see.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And same with not necessarily touching on Leaper X. A lot. I saw some conversation online about, well, why haven't we seen Janice, or and this sort of stuff. It's been 2 episodes, guys. Like, cool your jets, man. What happened?
Somebody on Facebook and in a different group, not in our group, in a different group, somebody's like, oh, so I guess the Janice storyline was a bust, and they're just gonna
they dropped it. It's like,
they're like, no, just calm down.
It's the thing that's so interesting to me is I really want to see the intersection of people that are massively impatient with the development of this television program, that are also above the age of like 50, because there's actually like a huge intersection there based off of what we're seeing on Facebook. And I'm shocked. I'm baffled by it, because it's just like, you come from a time where binging a television show was like not even humanly possible, and now you're sitting here in 2022 and you're bitching because you haven't seen something in 2 episodes. It's like, let it develop, let it play out. Like,
sure.
It's not, I don't know. I just think they're doing such a wonderful job of like crafting this show. It's turning into a show that is just like, don't you dare be missing this show. Like, this is the best show that you're not watching right now. And to not have the patience to let things play out, to let things breathe, to watch these characters develop and grow. And I mean, it's quite remarkable, and I'm enjoying it so much. And and yet we're still getting hit in the face with big moments, especially towards the end of a lot of these episodes. So it's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So let's talk about, Raymond again. We get to him demanding the demon to come forth. He gets knocked out. We get the wonderful hallucination scene.
Brilliant.
With him and Addison.
Absolutely loved it.
That was love. What a wonderful way to lay out a bit of exposition.
And get some kisses.
And get some kisses. And you get to see Ben and Addison touching each other.
How freaking incredible is it that when Ben hallucinates and is basically talking to himself, in his mind, the smart part of himself that comes out, the part that helps him figure everything out, is Addison.
Yeah.
Like, that's beautiful. I love it. And it's just is like, get him back to the project so they can make out again. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So they can be together, because it's really lovely. And I really enjoyed that moment a lot. And it was such a turning point for this episode, but I feel like it was also, just as a viewer, it was kind of a turning point for me, and the level of my investment in their relationship, and in the way that Ben perceives Addison and himself to a degree. I just felt like it was an incredibly strong, powerful moment for the episode and for the series as a whole. I really do.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And then, of course, he wakes up, goes to call 911. Oh yeah, no 911. And this is where we start going down the road of him figuring out that he was drugged. And I called it earlier, back before we started getting into the spoilers. As soon as they started going that route, with the maid, Betsy was sitting there watching, going, yeah, Jimson Wood. Like, Betsy was calling it out, like she had it like 2 minutes before Ben did.
Yeah. The devil's snare. So a couple of things real quick, just to fill in the blanks here, is that Tessa had a fortune that she was going to leave. Sure. It was, when Daisy turned 18, it was hers. And that the will had basically been, a portion of it was hers rather, that the will had basically been rewritten, and that Tessa's father, Charles, was no longer going to be included in the will, because Tessa was upset with him because he'd lost his job in depression and losing his investment, which Percy had pressured him into. We find out as well. Percy is a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman. Not only does he enjoy that aspect of it, but apparently he enjoys getting to visit all the lonely housewives during the day, doing that work. And then, of course, we also learn that again, names are escaping me right now because we just watched it, but
Which one?
Lola,
Lola.
who played by Elise Levesque, which we've not given her nearly enough talk,
Sure.
because she's great in this episode as well. Just does an amazing job. And Lola, of course, she at one point has this wonderful moment with Ben where she's like, I think that this is all my fault. Daisy was conceived out of wedlock, and Ben has this beautiful line about like, I don't think God waited 18 years and 9 months to punish you, like,
Yeah.
And we learned that she wanted to be an actress. She wanted to go to Hollywood. She wanted to do all of these things, and that she hasn't gotten a chance to do any of that sort of stuff, which obviously is important, comes into play later. And again, the family's just very well drawn. The 18th birthday party, things did not go well. Charles was really pissed, stabbed his own daughter's birthday cake with a knife. Poor Daisy. There's all sorts of stuff at play here, and everybody kind of seems at odds in one form or another. And of course, when the story shifts, now all of a sudden we've got a nice drawing room, detective story going on here. And it's, and Ben is, turned into Poirot, and it's wonderful. It's like this, I love the way that it twists and changes the conventions a bit. And everyone's a suspect, right? Except now Magda is not a suspect, because Magda's helping him figure things out. And Magda is horrified to learn that she's been the one that's accidentally been poisoning Daisy. Magda helps Ben figure things out. Ben has this wonderful encyclopedias, the original internet.
Yeah.
He uses those to find out, like you said, what Betsy called before Ben even got to the Jimson weed. Devil's snare, which causes fevers and hallucinations, among other things. And with that information, they're able to kind of like put a plan together to figure out to do a nice whodunit here. And this is where the episode almost started to lose me a little bit, because I wasn't 100% sold on the plan of pretending that Daisy was dead in order to expose the villain. At first, I was just sort of like, oh my God, like Lola is bawling her eyes out. Look what you have done to her poor mother. And then, of course, like the everything unfolds, and I was just sort of like, okay, that's all right. It's all right. It's like I'll buy it. I'm on board with it. But there was definitely a moment where I was just sort of like, damn, Ben, that's cold.
Well, see, I mean, from a realistic standpoint, I was like holding her breath, or at least like breathing very shallowly,
right,
to make it believable. But Sam had the husband fake a heart attack in Moments to Live.
That's right.
President has been set. No. Anyway. So yeah, I mean, yes, and I mean, I like in an episode like this, it's a very genre episode. Like, it's hard to say like that stretches credibility a little bit, but.
Oh no, it was more, I think it was just more for me that there was just that kind of a slight emotional disconnect, because I was just sort of like, why would Ben put her through this, sort of thing. But it's also worth mentioning, of course, that the whole reason that Ben is passed out is because Percy drugged his drink with weed as well. Because Ben, he offered Ben a drink early on. Ben didn't want it. Ben starts drinking it early, which is then when he starts to kind of start seeing everything, which is really wonderful the way that they layered that in. Then he comes back later, and before he decides to like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to suppress, all of my need for facts. And I'm going to go in there as a man of faith. I'm going to make this happen. And he downs, a big portion of the drink, and then goes up. And that's when he sees everything out, and that's when he passes out. He finds a secret passageway as well, which he discovers that somebody's been using that to get into Daisy's room. We don't know whose room that is yet. We find out later that Percy, that it was Percy's room, and
that he had been poisoned even before with the soup, and that's why he hallucinates even in the very first scene.
Right.
Or the first encounter to have the demon present itself. Yeah.
So we have between the soup and the gin, and of course the soup is what Daisy's been getting every day. They figure that out. Ben is, like, how am I going to expose Percy? And then we get this great scene where the cops are there finally. Everybody's, surrounded around Daisy's body, and it's just, they really thread the needle on this when it comes to the balance of like comedy and intrigue and drama, and it ends up working out so well that after multiple times during this episode, it's so atmospheric and you're kind of creeped out and you're having moments where like, your heartstrings are being pulled on a little bit, and you're getting some of these really great character moments, and now all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm getting some levity here. I think the air is starting to let out. Okay, I can breathe a little bit. And it's really wonderful the way that all plays together. And as Percy is revealed to be the criminal, Percy also goes on to reveal the fact that he's not alone. And Ben has this great moment where he's like, say again, like,
what? Yeah.
Like, rewind that. And it's beautiful. And then Lola, it turns out, and Percy have had a thing going. And it's just sort of like, Lola, I don't even care that you were crying so much. It's you're a horrible human, and
so my issues that I had with this scene, and like not serious issues, but just like my realistic literal brain, going off here, is one, asking Daisy to breathe shallowly to like pass off being dead. Sure. But then also, as soon as she sat up, I was like, that cop's gonna pull a gun and shoot her dead.
Oh man. Oh god. Like the end of Night of the Living Dead, when they bust in and Ben comes out from the cellar and they shoot him because they think he's another zombie. No, but you know what, one of the and this is where the heart of the episode just really comes into play, and there's this incredibly moving moment where Daisy looks right at her mother and says that she forgives her, and like Lola cannot comprehend that at all. And the cop has this line, like, again, in the midst of all of this like heaviness and these wonderful moments, we get this nice little moment of levity where the cop's just sort of like, well, maybe she forgives you or God forgives you, but
but the law doesn't.
Right. Yeah, it takes her off in handcuffs.
But even before that, just a wonderful moment. What's the name of the actor's name who plays Daisy again?
Carrie Metters.
Carrie
Metters. Yep.
Carrie. Anyway,
nice.
Like, but just like the look of heartbreak on her face when the sheet comes down.
Oh yeah.
Of like, like that her mom and uncle basically were poisoning her.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, Shane Callahan, who plays Charles, who is Daisy's father, they have this incredible moment where, prior to this, Charles was really kind of set up to be a bit of a bastard. Like, you didn't really like him. He didn't, it's like he cared, but he felt very aloof. That moment on his daughter's birthday when he's getting all pissy over the the inheritance and all this sort of stuff. And part of it is he doesn't want it. Like, he says, like, I don't need your help, I don't care. He's clearly having a difficult time. And again, the subtext of this and the subtlety of it and everything, it's like you end up having this wellspring of empathy for him when you figure out, like, oh wow, well, his wife's been cheating on him with his brother. And in addition to that,
he got pressured into an investment that
he didn't want
judgment. Yeah.
Right. And now what's the one thing that he has left? And he looks over and he sees his daughter, and his poor daughter there, who has this incredible strength of character to be able to say, like, what I believe in is forgiveness and forgiving you. So I'm going to forgive you to this woman that has done all these horrible things. And he just goes right over to her and gives us hugs. And that was one of the most moving moments of the episode for me. It was just really lovely to see that. And Daisy being this incredible vessel for all of this. And again, Carrie Metters knocked out of the park, because I think that the transition that the character goes on from being drugged out and hallucinating and possessed by a demon to to being now back in control of herself and having this lovely moment with her father was a really nice piece of resolution for the character. And it felt as, what it reminded me of? Here we go, I'm gonna throw something really big out here. It reminded me of the end of Thou Shalt Not. And the reason why I say that is because it didn't feel like everything was okay, but it felt like it was going to get there. And I'm a sucker for that. Like, give me those types of endings any day of the week. Don't tie it up with the bow. Just show me the string in the
Don't tell us how many kids the couple's going to have.
Right. And I loved that. I loved that there was that notion of that. And you got, and that continued in the scene between Daisy and Ben, which takes place in Daisy's room before Ben leaves.
Or before she leaves.
Well, she leaves first. And we get this lovely moment where she reaffirms the fact that's like, I saw, you're an angel. I saw you. I saw a man with dark hair and dark eyes.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like,
Yeah.
You're doing it, guys. Like whatever you're doing over there, y'all. Like
we're gonna get there eventually. If someone really at the beginning, I thought they were gonna go there like from the beginning that she saw Ben as Ben.
Yeah.
But anyway, but speaking of people who see Ben as Ben.
Yes. So
first off, I want to jump back and talk about, we haven't talked about the character called the Shadow in the promotional photos.
Yes.
Which we got a very clear look of her in the promotional photos that we put out there. Like people, it just looks like very creepy. And you were texting me, you thought maybe it was Janice in some kind of weird getup or whatever. And now we know it was just like, that's just what they had the actor look like on set while they were filming, and they never actually showed.
No.
If there's one criticism I do have of this episode, like I wanted to see more of that shadow, because I think there was only like one encounter.
There's only really one time where it's like visible. Like the rest of the times it was it was a shadow basically. Yeah.
And then so then Janice breaks through, and now we know what this thing was that she was building the last time we saw her back at the end of the boxing episode. That was an imaging chamber.
Yep. And Janice is there, and she is talking to Ben, and she's, my name is Janice Calavici, and
you don't remember me, but yeah.
But I'm here to warn you. And of course, before she can warn, Ben leaps.
Mm-hmm.
So before we talk a little bit more about Janice, a couple of things that are worth pointing out is that there are some really wonderful lines and interplay between, the hallucinating / possessed Daisy and Ben. At one point, she looks at him and says, "The end is nigh for you, traveler." And I mean, if that's not, if that's not something worth picking up on, I mean, that's some foreshadowing.
I really thought at some point the demon, the quote demon, was going to call Ben by name.
Right. I know. I felt like that was kind of where it was leading in some ways. Another thing that happened at the project is that one of the things that when Addison is kind of really struggling and getting, emotional about not being able to be there for Ben. Because, again, it's worth mentioning, Addison is not present with Ben from the time she leaves and steps away. Ben does this all by himself. And one of the things that she says to Jen is like, the leaps are getting harder. And how could that not make you think of Mirror Image? And the leaps are going to get harder. And it's just sort of like, damn, she's not wrong. Like, think about everything that he's had to do over the past couple of episodes and how it's been more difficult, really.
And then there's this.
Sure. Go ahead.
You may be going down the same road I'm about to go down.
Another thing that happened at the project, which is awesome, and I feel like helps to answer some questions. And again, don't know if the writers were writing to a certain, subset of people on the interwebs or not. Doesn't matter either way, because it was awesome. Is that Ian is paying so close attention to the internet and to Reddit about this post that they saw about the exorcism and Daisy's death, that they see the page go to a 404 not found. And that's how they know that Ben was successful. And it's this really great moment. And it's just sort of like, oh, this is awesome. Oh, but they remember. Like they know what Ben was there to change. And it reinforces that notion that we've always had, that like, the people at the project, like, of course they know. Like, of course, like Magic's going to know what Sam was there to change, because he's read it, because the people at the project probably kept records. And because again, like Al especially, Al is aware of the timeline where he and Beth did not get married. Al absolutely remembers his 5 other wives. Like, Al absolutely has all of those memories. I will believe that until we are told otherwise. And I think a scene like this, a moment like this, where Ian and Addison so clearly are able to say, like, this is what Ben was there to do, like in their memories, their way of interpreting the timeline and what's happening. It's like they're aware of something that now no longer ever happened. And I think that's just because that's their perspective of time. It does not, the quantum leap verse, if you will, time travel has never necessarily worked the way that time travel has worked in like every other, iteration. I mean, time travel is a little bit different in any piece of fiction that tackles it. So again, I thought that was a really cool moment.
I thought everything that you said, like, it kind of tells us how the effects of what changes are made in the past, how it affects everybody at PQL. It's kind of like more of a definitive thing because we got like little bits and pieces of that through the original show of how it worked, but like we never got anything like so solidly as that right there.
Right.
What I found interesting, I would love to know like what the conversation was with the writers in the room of what made them decide to do like the 404 page not found versus them showing the same Reddit article, but now it was an article about like showing like the resolution of like, oh, how Daisy was almost killed, but then it was turned out she was being poisoned.
I love that that's not the case, because for me, there would have
even
been
as I say it out loud, I'm like, no, that doesn't work. You know,
right?
Yeah,
because it's like, why would that be noteworthy enough, right? You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
it was noteworthy before, and now it's just sort of like something that happened. So yeah, I thought that I thought that it worked really well. I thought it was a great decision, and yeah, man, what a wonderful 42 minutes of television. Like, just I thought I feel like it's their first real iconic episode of Quantum Leap. This is one of those episodes that I think people will talk about, you know, for a while, to say the least. And I think it's one of those episodes that people will want to revisit and have fun with. And I think it's an episode that, unfortunately, something we have not been able to do, will bear a rewatch. I think it'll be worth seeing again, much like Salvation or Bust was, you know, for different reasons. But I think that this is, now obviously a couple of things about, we don't get any mention of Leaper X in this episode. Two things about that: we don't necessarily know how episodes were shot and which order that they were shot. It's entirely possible that this one was actually shot prior to Salvation or Bust. I don't know that that's the case. I don't even know if it's worth thinking that that's the case necessarily. But it's possible that that is the case. And if that were the case, then there's your issue. It's just a production thing. They didn't mention it because they hadn't aired that episode yet in their, planning in their mind when they were, producing this episode. Alternatively, there's just nothing new to report, right? Like, that's part of the thing. I know people are kind of like hungry for answers, but we've got 18 episodes, and I don't think that it's necessary to hammer us with that every week, right? There's going to be plenty of opportunities to dive into that, and I think that we benefited from it in a great way, because we had this incredibly atmospheric leap that was solely centered on the leap, that was kind of Ben solo for most of it. Acting showcase for Raymond Lee, who was awesome.
Ben
Incredible, writing, superbly crafted episode all across the board.
Yeah. It was, I had a thought, and then you said something, and then it just let it run out of my mind. It is 11:30 now, by the way, when at night when we were recording. What was I?
Well, here, I'll go to this real quick.
Go to that. Maybe it'll come back to me.
So the leap out we're talking about real quick is that Ben's a kid. That's going to be fun. And his name's Ben. These kids run by him. They're like, Ben, come on. We see some adults chasing them. They're at the Sierra Youth Academy, I think is what it was called. They're running. They're breaking out. I think one of the characters says, "We escaped." They get in a car. They punch it
from school.
Ben's like, from school, and they're headed off into the wilderness, basically, because as the camera pans back, we just see that there's nothing around. It's not like, this is going to be like some sort of urban adventure. The name of the episode we already know is Stand By Ben. Clearly it's going to lean into what is, one of my favorite movies, Stand By Me. So I look forward to seeing what they do with it. It looks like it's going to be a really wonderful piece in a lot of ways. The production photos that have been released online look great. Very excited for it. And from what we've heard, it gets to be something completely different from anything that they've done up until this point, and something that apparently might be very different from anything anybody else is doing on the airwaves right now. So really looking forward to next week. One thing that we can say about next week, and this has been confirmed to us, this is an exclusive.
I'm going to cut you off here. I'm going to tease people. I now remember what I thought I was going to say.
Oh,
what I was going to say earlier. Because some people were asking about this on Twitter. Leaper X. Do we think that we're going to see some flashbacks, and like, was he seen in the earlier episodes? He was like hidden in the background. I don't think they actually shot Walter Perez in any of those. I think two things might happen. One, they may show us flashbacks later and show that he was in the background somewhere and insert him into shots. I think the more likely thing is that we're going to find out they're going to pull some timey-wimey stuff, and Ben is going to keep encountering him later, but from Leaper X's perspective. I've already lost my train of thought. You know what I mean?
It's all right. They're meeting out of time. That's something I said last week, actually. In talking about that, I think is or 2 weeks ago maybe, is that they could indeed play with it where they're meeting out of time, and so that from Leaper X's perspective,
he's encountered Ben several times before. Yeah,
right, exactly. Whereas Ben's never seen him before. The next time they meet, Ben will be like, "Hey, it's you," and and Leaper X will be like, "Who are you?" Sort of thing. So
yes.
Yeah, so I think that'll be really interesting to see if they do play with that. Who knows? Maybe they won't. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. Right?
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in before you drop a couple exclusives that we got.
I'm glad you did. Yes. So we can drop that. You heard it here first. That episode 8 will indeed be the last episode before they take their break. It will be a bit of a break too. We're not going to see any more Quantum Leap until the new year, after the new year. So that'll be great for us because it'll give us a lot of time to do some new things. We've got a couple things in the pipeline that we can't wait to share with you. But they will, during that break, this is a really cool thing. They will be re-airing Quantum Leap twice a week. So Mondays in their normal time slot and Saturdays at 8 p.m. You'll get to continue to see episodes of Quantum Leap all through their hiatus there before they come back afterwards to finish up the season with the last 10 episodes of the first season. And hopefully at some point, earlier the better, we'll hear about a season 2 order from NBC, and we'll know we're really off to the races, and it'll be a lot of fun. We're going to endeavor during the break that they have. We will, obviously still be producing episodes. Maybe we'll take like a week off just to kind of recharge ourselves or whatever.
Sure.
But the plan is to keep going and do some more recaps, and maybe even try to get a little bit in depth and get some guests on to just keep the wheels rolling. I wish I said this to somebody earlier. I wish we had like 1 million followers. I really do, because I want more than anything to be able to go online and just be like, watch Quantum Leap on Halloween night. Like whatever you do, just watch Quantum Leap on Halloween night. Like if you can't stream it on Peacock on Tuesday, great. Just watch this episode, because I feel like it would absolutely, for me, I've loved it. I'm in obviously since day one, but like for anyone who's been on the fence, I just feel like this is an episode that will absolutely change a lot of minds about the show, and I think encourage people to go back and maybe revisit episodes with a fresh set of eyes. So I think it's phenomenal, and I'm so excited, and it's great. Getting a bit of a break here. It sucks because I wish we were just going to get more episodes right away. But yeah, we can confirm that episode 8 will be the last before the break, that it will continue to air on Mondays at 10 Eastern, 9 Central, and Sundays at 8. And yeah, it's gonna be fun times.
It's gonna be fun. So I'm wondering, like, it's great that they're basically gonna rerun the series like so far over the break. And so it's gonna give people like a chance to rediscover the show. I wonder if that also comes from a place that NBC doesn't have a whole lot of programming and other stuff to insert in there right now too. So it's also a practical thing beyond that.
Could be.
But also, from a fan retention, from a ratings thing, it's very important that we keep all the fans on board when we come back for the latter half, because some people have said, like, Ordinary Joe, I think that's a series that they keep comparing Quantum Leap to as far as ratings from last year. That one of the reasons that killed the show is that when they came back from the long winter break, and like this is a thing that curses shows now that we have these like shorter seasons and long mid-season breaks, is that when you have the break in the season, you could lose viewers when you come back. So let's make sure that we keep the chatter going on Twitter, keep everybody on board. And come in. Because I really thought we were going to get a couple more episodes before the break. So kind of disappointed, but then we have more on the back end. And truthfully, it gives them more of a chance to like find their footing even a little bit more.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to know. I'd love to know what all has been, shot thus far. I mean, I think that at this point that they're only on like episode 11 as far as filming goes.
We do know from the casting notice that went out and that we shared the other day that there is an episode coming up involving a transgender teen named Justice, because they're looking for casting for a transgender woman. And the shoot dates for like November 11th through 13th, 14th.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Dennis.
And I can't remember what episode number that is. I feel like that's 8 or 9. No, it won't be 8.
No.
Yeah, next week.
No,
so I feel like it's like 9 or 10 maybe. So that kind of gives you an idea of like where they are on the production schedule.
Yeah, could be. No, I'm really glad you brought that up. And I'm going to take this opportunity to do something that sometimes, I've done earlier in the episode, but I wanted to save towards the end because I wanted to make sure that we got through everything about OE of Little Faith. But I feel like it's important to mention, and I thought about saying this and how I was going to say this because I didn't want to single anyone out, and I certainly didn't want to make anyone feel bad whatsoever. So I'm not going to be specific, and I'm not going to name names because that's not what this is about. However, I think that I use this very gently, but I think that when you have a bully pulpit, it's only as good as it is if you use it. And I feel very passionately about what I'm about to say, and it's very important to me. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity at this particular point in time to celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion at every turn. And when this casting notice went out, I felt like it was a time for celebration beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I think we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes when we approach it with a certain smug certitude. And I would love to see us not do that. I would love to see us not bait those that may be opposed to our perspective and our point of view, because we are absolutely never going to bring any conversation worth having to the table if we do that. And the only way we can do that is to continue to celebrate these moments when they happen, and to realize that there are people out there that clearly have our back. There are clearly people out there that are aligned with our way of thinking. And there are clearly people out there that have the intentions that we want so badly to come to the front in their hearts. And when we take the time to instead bait other people, it's a bad look, and it makes us seem like we're just down there slinging mud and we're cackling and we're throwing something at someone just because we believe that we know what their reaction is going to be before they've even had the reaction. And it's the reason why Dennis and I have always endeavored, in any opportunity that we've had to engage with fans on our social media at all, that we try to do it in as considerate and deliberate a manner as possible, because I don't want to go looking for any fights. If those fights come to us, I think that we're well equipped to handle them. But until they do, I think our job is simply to celebrate this show, to celebrate the things that we believe in, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to continue using our voices to uplift and build up those around us and those that we believe in and the things that we believe in, instead of trying or attempting to tear anything else down. So I would just ask that if you have the opportunity to do the same, by all means, do it. And maybe think twice if you're going to head in the other direction.
Everything you just said with one caveat. At this point, if you come griping about the lack of the waiting room, I'm going to get snarky.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything.
God, I've seen a lot of the quotes recently too about the waiting room. Just like, what?
Yeah. Yes, but everything you just said, I do agree with that, and I do know which comments that you were talking about, and I will say that when I first read those, like, I was kind of tempted to go down that road too, but then like, oh, that, like you said, and somebody else like called it out on the thread. It's like you're kind of taking like this smug point of view, like what other people are going to think, and it's just like, it's understandable, but there's a difference between like things you say in a private conversation and things you say in a public forum.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean?
I would rather believe in hope, the hope that those expectations are not going to be met. And I think the only way to pursue that course is to not throw those expectations out for all to see.
Sure.
I understand where those expectations come from.
I get that, but yeah, because what I will say is I have seen, I've seen a lot of posts on Twitter talking about, while we're speaking of gender issues and transgender issues right now, that a lot of people didn't truly understand like the idea of transgender or non-binary until they saw Mason Alexander Park in the show, and it kind of clicked for them, and they got it.
Worth noting, by the way, that not all non-binary people identify as trans.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, that's the thing.
They're not interchangeable.
They're not. I mean, there are some people, non-binary and transgender, like they consider that interchangeable, but not everybody considers that interchangeable. So, case by case, like be aware of the language that you're using, because like you don't know how people like identifying like what terms they prefer. Yes, excellent point. But more broadly to that point, what I'm trying to, it's like, instead of like going down the snarky route that you were just talking about, is like celebrate, like, this episode that they are going to be doing upcoming with the character Justice, like that gives an opportunity to educate people and bring them in. And a lot has been said, it's been pointed out on Twitter, that we have not seen really any social justice issues addressed so far in the new series, or if it is, it is very lightly. And right. I think that they are very aware of what they are doing. So I think even when we get to the episode, when we are just very upfront and center dealing with not just a transgender person, but a transgender teen, which is such a huge point of polarization right now in this country, and conversations that we're having, especially to do with athletics. Because if I remember right, like Justice is an athlete.
Yeah.
Right. I think so we are like, we're just like hitting on a very specific thing. I think the writing team is going to be coming at it from a way that is compassionate, a way that educates, but also it is not going to be a hit you over the head thing.
It's going to be a nuanced portrayal, and I'm very excited.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah. So
I think that I have a lot of faith.
Mm-hmm. I think yes. So I'm looking forward to seeing that episode. And like I said, like the conversations that we can have of coming from, there's a lot of value in normalizing things that are unfamiliar with us.
Yes.
By talking about them as if they are normal, because that's what they should be. They should be normal. So there's a way of
why representation matters.
Exactly. So there's a way of approaching it like that. And then, and there are so many things, like there are like, I don't even engage with folks online who definitely come from a bigoted point of view. Because we had someone recently, they commented on one of our posts, and they didn't like come right out and say it, but it was a bigoted comment in relation to Mason. Didn't even address it. Once every couple of weeks, we get a comment on our blog. The way our settings, I have to approve comments before they actually appear, and I don't respond. I don't approve them. I just delete them. So, because sometimes I feel like if you are coming at it from that point of view, there is not a conversation that we're going to have through talking through the internet that is going to change your mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't have a succinct way or an articulate way to wrap all my thoughts up there, but yes, everything you said. Like
I'll just make an awkward segue if you want me to.
Sure, go ahead. We are the
another thing I want to talk about that I saw online recently, it had to do with the parentage of Addison, and I love seeing all these theories. I really do. But I just wanted to throw out there that, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? Like, I don't believe that Addison's hesitation to talk about her parents, who, she talks about a little bit more in this episode, funny enough. I don't think that that's any sort of like signpost that her parents are Sam and Donna, like somebody, theorized or whatever.
Sure.
I think that no, she just has parents that she has a weird relationship with, that
Yeah,
they
and
got a
they briefly touched
divorce,
on it
and
in this episode. Yeah.
yeah, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will come out that, her parents are somehow involved with the original project or something like that. But I think it's very important to, always try to temper those expectations when it comes to connections, to the
Sure.
old show, getting too steeped in the mythology, because then everything just becomes, an Easter egg. Everything just becomes a piece of fan wank. Everything becomes a piece of, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not,
Mhm.
it starts to just feel gratuitous. And there's a term for it, and I cannot think of it right now, because it's, almost midnight. But I feel like I would much rather just see, like, the human drama of her parentage unfold, as opposed to it have to be this other big piece of the mystery. Now, if it is, great, but, like, yeah, so theorize away, go for it. But again, just temper the expectations, because it could just be that, no, she just doesn't like to talk about her parents much, because she had a difficult relationship with them for whatever reason.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, oh, good.
I was gonna say, yeah, to that point, like, we already have the Janice and Al and Beth
Right.
connection. We have the magic connection. I feel like if you start making too many more connections like that, it's just going to jump the shark.
Right.
In a weird way. So I don't need any more connections like that. But to that point, like, I also realize that part of the fun of a show like Quantum Leap is getting to theorize about the things that you don't know. I mean, I was thinking about the other day, like, one of the things that I loved about it as a kid, like, they did not go into the details of how the project worked. And that's one of the things that I loved thinking about when I was a kid. I was like how exactly the project works.
Right.
So I'm all about, having fun and theorizing, and let people have their fun, and don't yuck anyone else's yum. As far as that, let people believe what they want until they get proven otherwise, and we shall see.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing.
Speaking of yuck and yum, I am late to the party, but I just recently started watching She-Hulk, which I mentioned earlier in the show, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. I just don't understand anyone that seemed to apparently have a problem with it. I imagine that a lot of those people didn't even watch it. That's fine. I just think it's phenomenal. I think that Tatiana Malinzi is just, I massacred her last name. I'm really sorry about that. Is phenomenal. I mean, just out of this world, great. And one thing I want to talk about too is about special effects. Like, special effects in this episode, I think, are great. For instance, right? Evil Effect and Quantum Leap. I just, again, expectations are a weird thing, and sometimes I wonder, it's like, what exactly are you expecting from special effects these days? Because some of the complaints I hear, I'm just sort of like, I mean, it's a special effect. Like, if it didn't look like a special effect at all, I'd be a little scared. I'd start to wonder if my
Sure.
reality was my reality. I mean, I'm being, flipped, but
Sure.
I don't know. Anyway, I really love it. So anyone who's listening to this that hasn't had the opportunity to check it out, since we've talked about the MCU a little bit before, when we were kind of trying to figure out what we were doing before we knew we were getting more Quantum Leap, we talked about some of the MCU shows and everything, and I think it's great, and I just think there's a lot to love about it. I love that it doesn't take itself too seriously. There's some fourth wall breaking stuff in the episodes,
sure.
which I just love, which are of course a callback to the classic comic book as well. But anyway, I just loved it, and I know that apparently it was a little divisive, and
Sure.
I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked.
Yeah. How far are you into the series?
I think I'm only 4 episodes in.
Like 4 episodes.
Yeah.
I will say, like, in the latter half, there were some special effects shot that even, like, oh, okay, I can see the cracks in the special effects. And more broadly, like, people are complaining, not just She-Hulk, but more broadly, like, Marvel is churning out so much content now, and that from what I understand, like, I don't know if this is like how true this is, but there's the belief that there aren't enough special effects people working for Marvel, so that the team that they do have is overworked.
Yeah.
And so some corners are cut. I can see that. The one valid criticism I've seen of the series, and I hadn't really thought about it until they pointed out, it was like, it's really hard to wrap your head around that Jennifer Walters has trouble getting dates and dating successfully outside of She-Hulk.
I don't know.
I was like, yeah.
Back in the 90s, it was like every supermodel that I saw get interviewed on like any show whatsoever would always talk about how they couldn't get dates because people were so intimidated to approach them. So maybe it's like that sort of thing.
So maybe it's
Isn't that
that
funny?
kind.
That's what the 90s wanted you to believe, right?
That's what the
Like,
90s.
I think,
Oh,
like attractive people always had trouble getting dates because people were just too intimidated to come up to them or something.
the
I don't know.
90s wanted you to believe that Subway was healthy
Hey, man.
and that Chandler Bing was charming.
Oh, Matthew.
That's a whole
Leave
other thing
Leave Keanu alone.
That's
No.
a whole other
Anyway,
thing
all right, we've jumped the shark. So let's. You know what hasn't jumped the shark is Quantum Leap, and I am just so thrilled with what the creative team has been doing. Y'all are great, and I think that one of the things that's so weird about doing this podcast the way that we're doing it right now is that we talk about episodes, you know, in such close proximity to just viewing the episodes once, and upon rewatches, sometimes new things unfold to us, and I know that I wasn't super jazzed about What a Disaster. And while I do believe that some of the criticisms that I had still hold, that upon the rewatch, I enjoyed it so much more. And I think that part of that is too, is just like, you know, there's no pressure about having to talk about it later. Right. And I think that I said this on last week's episode, that all in all, I thought the episode was a great success and an enjoyable episode. But it's always interesting, you know, and one of the best things that happens out of this podcast and continues to happen are the conversations that we get to see take place with, you know, within the fandom, whether that's, you know, on our Twitter and in response to messages or on our Facebook or whatever. It's so cool to see the conversations that are happening around it. And one of the reasons why is because it helps to alter, you know, my perspective. And that's the reason why representation matters in general, right? Is that you can have a perspective altering moment. And so I've just been loving seeing all these conversations. And speaking of which, I will single some people out. Lauren and Janelle, you guys had an awesome conversation on our Twitter thread talking about the impact of Sam's leaps, the impact on Al's life, the memories that they retained or didn't retain. I love seeing stuff like that. I was tempted to jump in. That was kind of the day that I think I was sickest, and so I didn't actually jump in. And I'm glad that I didn't, because I just loved getting to see it unfold and loved seeing the conversation that y'all had. So thank you so very much for that, and thank you to everyone that continues to engage and have those conversations, because it's just so cool to see. And I want this fandom to continue to thrive. And, you know, as Quantum Leap goes forward, I just want to see it get bigger and bigger and more exciting. And I love seeing the people that are coming to the show for the first time that have never seen Quantum Leap before, ever before, like your mother-in-law. And so thank you for that. Thank you all so much. And what else you got, Dennis?
I will say one more note. I'm glad you brought up about like our criticisms of What a Disaster, because there was another comment made. I can't remember if it was Facebook or Twitter this last week, but we were both kind of critical of the whole the flashback sequence and the phone call back to whatever. And somebody posted, and I'm not sure if they were saying this in response to our criticism or if they were just saying this in general about the episode, but they said that they themselves, as an Asian American whose story very much is similar to Ben's story, that they found that whole story quite moving.
Yes.
So it was kind of a check for me of going, yes, it's important to know other people's perspectives on that. Because
absolutely.
Like for us, like we were able to like, you know, like see the cracks in it and not appreciate it as much. For someone else whose story is much like us, less like ours and more like Ben's, they found that incredibly moving.
One other thing somebody mentioned too that was a wonderful bit of perspective is that they were incredibly moved and saddened by the fact that Ben didn't get to have the conversation that like Sam got to have, you know, and that like what happened, for instance, when Ben leaped out, you know, what did that conversation look like? And just great pieces of conversation. And I think that, you know, the important thing to remember, and I hope that people know this from knowing us, but if you don't know us, that like we never think of our like words about this show or the classic series or anything for that matter or the final word. Like we have no approach of any sort of like certitude, for instance, about you know what we're saying. We're comfortable with being wrong, and I'm sure we are plenty of times. We just got incredibly lucky talking about a show that we loved when we were kids, and now it's back and we continue to talk about it, and people continue to listen, and for that we're grateful. But yeah, we hope that we can maintain you know, humility and that people understand that nothing we say is the final word by any stretch. Like we just want, if anything, we just want our words to kind of be the beginning of the conversation. That's why we want to produce our episodes in a manner that we can get them out right after the episode's over so that people can listen, and then we can be like, all right, let's all talk.
I will say, along those lines, and I promise listeners there'll be a final thought. We'll start wrap up. We are so this podcast
how is this even happening?
This podcast,
let's just do a quick one to get out of here.
This podcast is we are the epitome of the Midwest goodbye. Anyway, back in the 90s, Entertainment Weekly magazine, there used to be a regular column where one of the movie critics would answer letters from readers, and somebody asked, I can't remember the critic's name, she was a woman. Somebody asked the critic, what makes you think your opinion about movies is better than anybody else's? And her response has always stuck with me, and I think it kind of applies to what you were saying right here. Like, her response was like, I don't think my opinion about movies is better than anyone else's. My job as a reviewer is to articulate my opinion in a better way than most people could, or in a better way than most people want to take the time to. So I think that's what, like I said, sometimes, like when there are conversations like with Lauren and Janelle on Twitter or whatever, like I don't interject myself into those conversations, like just because like sometimes I just want to sit back and read. I don't feel like interjecting myself, and I don't want anybody, like we said, I don't want anybody to think that I'm coming into a conversation and thinking like my opinion matters more than anybody else's. It's just, we have a fun little platform here to talk to people, and some people actually like listen to me.
I know, right? I sat down at a restaurant table in a hotel with a guy named Yoshi. He's not listening, but if you are, Yoshi, hey. And he is a part of a very successful long-running podcast. And he and I were talking, and this is right before, I think, maybe it was about a year before we started Fate's Wide Wheel. And it was fascinating because I had no intention at that particular point in time of doing a podcast. I had no intention whatsoever. It was a year before we started. Now I remember. But for some reason, he just started talking to me, not in a way of like, this is what doing a podcast is like for me, but in a way of like, literally, he was like instructing me. Like, maybe it was Sam or Ben, and they knew that we were going to do this podcast, and because Yoshi was sitting there and he was like, it's kind of a weird situation sometimes, and you put yourself out there and you talk about it, and the most important thing to do is to just be as authentic as you possibly can be, and say what you mean, and approach it in a way that some people are going to like it and some people aren't, and that's all you can do is be you and do what you do. And you and I had a conversation off mic right before we started where it's like, you know what, we just got to keep doing what we're doing and not worry about anything else that's going on. And so if anybody's out there thinking about starting a podcast, I think and I think that's just true in life in general, right? Like you have to endeavor to be as authentic to yourself as you possibly can be, and not worry too much about what anybody else is saying or doing. And in this instance, it means that we get to have some really cool conversations with some really cool people and continue to do that. And yeah, we're just really grateful for that. And it's one of the reasons why it's so much fun to maintain that social media presence. Even if I was going to try to make some sort of weird supervillain analogy, because I know with Bezos, like everybody tries to call him Lex Luthor, but I can't even think of like what to call Elon Musk. So anyway,
I don't know. Yeah.
Before
I have the Walnut Grove image in my head, and so that's what I'm sticking with. That's what I'm sticking with for right now.
Michael Landon, he is mentioned in that Queer for Fear documentary, by the way, because of I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Anyway, you know what else? Oh no, I can't. Yes, I will. Just real quick. Good Night, Dear Heart is one of my favorite episodes of the classic series, and one of the things is that we know that there was certainly a piece of the fandom that LGBTQ in particular did not appreciate that episode in particular in retrospect, because the lesbian character was portrayed as like this psychopathic murderer and stuff, which I completely understand, and it was a refreshing perspective to have put forth to me. But one of the interesting things about this Queer for Fear documentary is that they talk about Basic Instinct in one of the episodes, and hearing some of the queer creators that are interviewed talk about that movie was fascinating to me. It made me think of Good Night, Dear Heart, and it made me think of something that you said actually a while back, back, where, you know, there were some lesbians that were just so glad to see lesbians on the big screen that they didn't give a shit that they just happened to be murderers. You know, it was just sort of like, in fact, there's one of the people in the documentary who was like, I thought it was kind of hot. And I love that. And it was nice again to have that different perspective, because of course there were other queer creators that were interviewed in the same documentary that did take issue with it, that did remember their friends like going to the picket line to boycott the film because they thought that the representation, it's like, well, if you're going to represent us, at least let us have some creative control, right? Because it's like a man's directing and a man wrote it, you know, all that sort of stuff. And it's like, absolutely right. You know, I'm nobody to say anything different from that. But it was also kind of nice to hear that it's like, there's place for differing degrees of perspective everywhere, you know. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It just made me think of that. I wanted to throw that out there. We should really get the hell out of here.
We should get out of here. Yeah.
Thank you to everyone that has stuck around this long. Let's continue the conversation. We appreciate you so very much. We'll be back next week to talk about Stand By Ben. But in the meantime, should we say it?
You say it. Sure thing.
Okay, fine. Leap responsibly.
Leap responsibly. All right. Take care, y'all.